Hello, how are you? It's good to be back. Thanks so much for tuning in. All right, so at first I was planning on this podcast being for teenagers and young adults or anyone who might be caught up in the norm or those who are trying so hard to be relevant, to go with the flow and fit in. And then the more I thought about it, I realized that this applies to all ages, not just young people. So I hope everyone gleans something from today's podcast, which, by the way, I have become a little obsessed with the word glean. We all have experiences or sit in classes or even socialize with friends, and some of us are passive participants and some of us glean or take away something from it. It's just a great action word. I want to glean what I can from others or glean something from this experience. Anyway, we all want to be gleaners, if that's even a word. So my hope is that you will glean or take away something from today's podcast. Do you know what a norm is? A norm is generally what most people do in a family or in a society. So for example, in your family, the norm might be to get your chores done before you get to hang out with your friends. Or the norm might be to go to church on Sundays with your family. There's norms in society. For example, if you were to go into McDonald's, the norm would be that you would walk up to the counter to place an order. You wouldn't go sit at the table and wait for a waitress to come to you. Not in McDonald's. In that type of a restaurant, the norm is that you go up to the counter to place your order. The norm would be that you would put a swimsuit on when you go swimming or gloves on when you go snow skiing. Perhaps in your culture, it might be hugging or shaking hands or a kiss on the cheek when you greet someone. Looking them in the eye when you say hello. Usually the norm is that the boy will drive the car on a date. The norm would be to say thank you when someone does something for you or gives you something, or to hold a door open for a woman or an elderly person. The norm is basically what most everyone does in that society or family. Some of these norms are just common, like watering your lawn or showering or bathing or wearing a helmet if you play football, while other norms encourage decency and respect and help us to be an honorable person in society, like shaking hands or looking at someone in the eyes when we talk to them. Norms can be good and positive and create respect in a society or a family. Unfortunately, many of the norms in society have slowly changed over the years in a very negative and demoralizing way. Yet, as a society who values following the norm, without realizing it, the norms are slowly chipping away and minimizing us to new lows. Let me give you some examples. And to you young people, some of these norms that used to be just might blow you away, but hang in there with me. Okay, so the norm used to be that if we missed a homework assignment or didn't get playing time with our sport or didn't get a job or got fired from a job or any number of mishaps, that we took full responsibility. That was the norm. We knew we had to work harder or change something about ourselves to succeed. And our parents made sure of it. I remember whenever I got in trouble or had a problem or a friendship issue, as hard as I tried to explain to my mom how it wasn't my fault, she would always make me take responsibility for the part that I did play or what I could have done differently. And she never blamed my friends, the teacher, or the coach. The focus was personal responsibility. And how grateful I am because it helped me to grow and mature and make better choices. Now, the norm is to play the role of a victim or treat your kids like they're a victim, to make excuses or blame or whine if things don't go our way. Basically, everything we talked about in the second podcast, playing the role of a victim, unfortunately, that is now the norm. Since everyone is doing this, we somehow think it's not only harmless or okay, but that it's actually working for us or paying off in some way. And yet the opposite is true. It's perhaps the most detrimental thing that is happening to our society and to ourselves. As I explained in the second podcast, this norm of playing the role of a victim keeps us from progressing, learning, moving forward, and keeps us from being happy. This norm is really bringing out the worst in us. Okay, let me give you another example. Believe it or not, it used to be the norm to go to a concert, a vacation, or anything, and to totally revel in the moment, completely engaging with whomever we were with, without even the thought of bragging or posting on social media for anyone to see. The focus was not about us and trying to get as much leverage out of the experience with lots of likes and comments. The focus was to have a good and meaningful time with our family or whoever we were with. And we did. Now, the norm is to focus on us, the post, to take the picture, so everyone can see that we went to the Taylor Swift concert, or that we look awesome in our swimsuit, or that we traveled to some place amazing, or that we were hanging out with so-and-so. Our motives and even our experiences have changed because it's become about bragging or posting. It's about us instead of really engaging and focusing on others or the experience. This norm has without a doubt robbed us of developing mature relationships, humility, our ability to live in the moment, and learning to be real and genuine in our motive and actions. But it seems harmless because after all, it's the norm and everyone is doing it. Okay, so here's another example. The norm used to be that everyone tried to be independent as soon as they could. They would work hard, save their money, and proudly be self-sufficient. That was a badge of honor. We didn't feel entitled, nor did we expect our parents or anyone to carry our load or rescue us from our challenges or pay for our schooling, our missions, our trips abroad, or our car. We just didn't expect it. And if we got it, we were deeply grateful. We were excited to mature and be grateful and be independent. Like I say, it was a badge of honor, and it brought a lot of self-confidence and dignity. It's been said that you are either a part of the problem or a part of the solution. And we proudly saw ourselves as a part of the solution. And our parents proudly allowed us to fall, fail, and struggle because they knew it was what was best for us. Now, the norm is to feel entitled and expect others to take care of us, to fulfill our dreams and wishes, to pay for our schooling, our cars, and our trips overseas. And if they don't, then we are going to whine and complain and tell them how all of our friends have parents who give them what they want. Since the norm is all about us, then we can't even comprehend why everyone wouldn't carry our load for us, especially our parents, who have a lot more money than we do. And unfortunately, this norm also includes the parents. Many have been deceived into thinking that what they should do or have to do to maintain a relationship with their kids or for their kids to succeed. So parents often create the norm of entitlement. This norm has single-handedly chipped away at our character, perhaps more than any other. This culture of entitlement is playing out in marriages, jobs, relationships, efforts, and feelings of self-worth, all in a negative way. We are shooting ourselves in the foot as we look to others to carry our load and solve our problems. It's the easy way out for the parent and the child, but it's killing us as a people and as a society, as it prevents us from building the character needed to forge ahead and tackle the more difficult things in life. But because it's the norm, we don't even see the harm in it. Okay, I'll just give you one more example, but there are so many, and maybe you can sit down with your friends or family and write some of the norms that you see and ask yourself if they're productive and helping you to be your best self, or if they are bringing you down in some way. Okay, so it used to be that we treated people with respect regardless if we agreed with them or not. It didn't matter if we liked the President of the United States or our parents. We showed respect to them. And when we said we would do something or make a commitment, we did it. It didn't matter if it wasn't as much fun as we thought it was going to be, or if it was harder than we thought it would be, or if our friends invited us to join them for something better. None of those things mattered. We made a commitment, and we were not looking for excuses to get out of that commitment. Our integrity was important to us. We had respect for whomever or whatever we committed to. Honor and respect were a big part of who we were. Believe it or not, that was the norm. Again, it wasn't about us. It was about doing the right thing and being respectful. Sadly, the norm has become a rude disregard and disrespect for anyone and everyone we don't like. And quitting something if the grass is greener or if we have a change of moods or options. That's become the norm. If we leave our boss or parents hanging or inconvenience someone, that's their issue, not ours. The respect for others is all but gone. People are critical of others, full of anger and intolerance and hate. There are a few parents out there trying hard to hang on to this most popular value of respect and integrity and to teach it to their kids, but it's becoming harder and harder because it's simply not the norm anymore. Well, I'm hoping I haven't shocked too many of you of how it used to be. I know there are still some people who have hung on to the old norms, and we are so grateful to you, and your kids will thank you someday. You know, many years ago, there was a professor at a college that challenged his class to go out and break the norm. So there was one girl in the class that went door to door lending a cup of sugar. So the norm would be that you would go to your neighbor and say, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? So she wanted to break the norm, so she took a big bag of sugar and went door to door and lended all of her neighbors a bag of sugar, or a cup of sugar. There was a boy that went into Marie Callender's. Now, Marie Callender's is a sit-down restaurant. He walked in. The hostess said, come on over here, and you can sit right here. When they got to the table, the boy said, that's okay, I'd rather stay standing. And the lady said, okay. Well, then the waitress came and took his order, and he stood there, and he gave his order. He stood there. He waited for his food. At this point, there's a few people in the restaurant starting to look at him and stare. He said by the time his food came, he was standing there eating it, and everyone in the restaurant was just looking at him and laughing. And he said, you know, I just wanted to sit down and enjoy my meal and just blend in with the crowd, but he was determined to break the norm, and so he stood standing until the bitter end when he paid his bill and he was off. Well, my friends, now is the time to stand up while the rest of the world is sitting down and break the norm. And trust me, there will be times when it'll be very uncomfortable and we will want to sit down and blend in with the crowd. But the norms of today are destroying us. They give us a false sense of security because everyone's doing it. And in the meantime, they are bringing us down to the lowest version of ourselves. And I haven't even mentioned the norms of dress, language, lacking gratitude, putting our phone before people, not sending thank yous for gifts versus a text or nothing at all. And so many other negative social norms that have crept in and replaced the positive ones and brought out the worst in us. If for 1 second we feel like it's okay to follow the norms of today, then we've been duped. We've been conned. The norms have dropped to new lows and we are going with them unless we choose to stand up. You know, I've always loved the story of the little girl that was out flying a kite with her dad. And her dad's holding the string and the kite is fighting the wind and this little girl's watching her dad being whipped around, and the little girl says, Dad, that kite wants to go. It wants to take off into the sky. Let's just cut the string and watch it go. And her dad said, oh no, you don't understand. We're actually holding that kite up. And she says, no, we're not. She saw the tension in the string. She saw her dad's arms being whipped around. She said, we're holding it back. And he said, no, it appears that way, but we're actually holding it up. Well, she didn't believe it. And so he cut the string to prove his point. And they both watched as the kite came tumbling to the ground. These principles, the standards, the decency, the old norms of being respectful of others, of acting civilly with love versus hate, of taking responsibility for our lives, of being true to our word, they all seem restrictive at times. as if they are holding us down, especially when they are not the norm anymore. And yet they are some of the very principles or the strings that hold us up, that help us to fly higher, to be more successful, to be happier. It's so important for us to understand this. I not only see young people cut the strings in their lives so that they can fit in. I have watched parents cut the strings in their kids' lives, lower the standards, take away boundaries, telling them that they don't have to work, that they don't have to pay their way, that they can do whatever they choose regardless of previous commitments, and wear what they want regardless how inappropriate it may be, and behave however they'd like. Those principles and those standards were their best assurance that their kids would fly, that they would succeed, and yet some parents literally cut the strings because they appear restrictive and think that maybe their child could fly higher without so many boundaries in their life. We will never fly higher when we cut the strings or lower the standards or take away the boundaries in our lives. They are for our benefit. Unfortunately, we live in a day when the norm is not in our best interest. We might think it's helping us to be popular and fit in or gain ground in the short term, but it's like cutting the strings. Eventually we will fall. Eventually the norms will fail us. Have you ever noticed that the stories that are making the news are of people who are breaking the norm? I remember reading about a guy who started the No Cussing Club. Women in pageants who dared to wear something modest, athletes who chose abstinence before marriage, or someone who had enough integrity to return a wallet with money in it, or teenagers who treated a special needs student with love and respect, or a young boy who took all of his money he earned from a lemonade stand to give to wounded veterans. Each of these acts used to be the norm. Now they're making the news. What does that tell us? The world is starving for anyone to stand up, to pull away from the crowd. As we break the norm, we will stand out for the good. We will fly higher, be happier, and more successful. Now, I know that this podcast is not going to change the norm, but I'm hoping it gets our juices flowing and helps us to rethink what we are doing and saying and why. And then mostly, I hope it gives someone the courage to stand up and break the norm. You will affect an entire generation if you do. Just like that college professor, I want to challenge each of us to go out and break a norm. Write a thank you note to someone who has given you a gift or done something for you or who's done a nice gesture in your behalf. Put your phone down and talk to your parents or your spouse. Find ways to be a giver and self-sufficient versus taking and feeling entitled. Be a lifter and a builder and not negative and divisive. Love people who believe differently than you. Stop swearing. Take responsibility. There are so many things that we can do. Now go out and break the norm. You just might wind up on the news. Hey, thanks so much for listening and have a great day.